I'm gonna kick things off with this J15. I don't know how well the camera's going to show this, but there is a lot of fall off right here at that neck to body junction. Now, it's okay for the fingerboard to ramp down a little bit, and I actually purposely do that on my own guitars. A lot of builders and manufacturers do that on purpose to sort of ramp the fingerboard down, but this is pretty extreme. The problem the customer's been having is he can't get the action down any closer without all kinds of buzzing. So this is going to need that proverbial fret dress at the neck junction, and we'll walk you through it step by step as always. There is another issue. Now, I have covered this before in other videos, but I want to bring you in close again and show you. See that? Ooh, that is not good. When the saddle is loose like that, this is not a rosewood bridge, this is a walnut bridge. When the saddle is loose like that, what happens is the string energy is actually pushing the saddle forward. And there's always a danger, especially in a narrow bridge like this, of just snapping the lip of the bridge right off. So we are going to make a new saddle, and it certainly isn't going to be wobbling like that when we're done. That's got the transducer underneath the saddle, so another reason to get a good tight fit. Well, we're going to start by heating this nut and getting it out, because we're putting a compensated nut in anyway, so I want to be able to go end to end uninterrupted, so this is coming out. Okay, so while that lacquer is warm, I'm just going to run that blade across there. This side as well, just that little, just the edge on both sides. So we're just cutting through the clear coat really, just so that when we pull it out we don't pull any lacquer with it. Let's see if that's going to cooperate. Well, that came out clean enough. Just going to chisel off that glue in the end of the fingerboard while it's still warm. It's interesting how things sort of have come full circle from the time of Orville, who started in Michigan back in the 1800s. And at that time in Michigan there were walnut trees 8 feet in diameter. And in many instances it was the wood of choice for Orville Gibson himself. Here we go, all that time later. So we've come full circle. Walnut fingerboard, walnut bridge, walnut back, walnut sides. Nothing wrong with it. Walnut's a good wood. Of course, Larrivée, lots of other manufacturers have jumped on the walnut wagon. I know lots of people sort of double back the string like that, and I understand what they're doing, but I never bother. I mean, the hourglass shape or profile of the post, when you tighten the string, it naturally just tightens on itself. So I really don't do that because, you know, it just makes the task of getting the strings off a little more precarious. You may scratch the headstock or poke your finger with the smaller strings like a hypodermic syringe. So typically from the point of manufacture until a year or so later, these will loosen up because the lacquer shrinks. In many cases the wood will shrink a little bit as well as it's been exposed to heat and temperature shifts. Just don't over tighten. So easy to strip. Tighten them until that washer doesn't move and you're golden. Well, before we can check that intonation at the saddle and the bridge, we need to be able to drop the action down so that the guitar is playable. The action, the way it was, you'd need a vice grip for a left hand to play chords on this thing. So we're going to take care of that problem spot I pointed out earlier. So these are the files that you guys get in your kits. Oh, and by the way, congratulations to Robert Antilla in Pennsylvania. Your kit is on the way. So we're taking care of this neck to body junction, and I will I've said it 100 times before and I'll say it again, that when you file, the file itself is dead flat. The frets obviously have a curvature on them. The only way to follow that curvature is to move obliquely as you file across the crown. We're going to check this with a straight edge in a second and see how close we are to getting rid of this eye spot that is preventing us from being able to drop the action down where it should be. Okay, that's much better. Now we'll re-crown all this nasty stuff here where the frets were leveled. Now, Robert, you were asking about fret files for crowning, and the only one I ever use is this one, which is the large Hosco file. And the reason for that is you can do a small fret with a larger file, but you can't do a large fret with a small file. So I got a mandolin with the little skinny one I've had for like 30 years in my toolbox. Never used it once. Even when I'm doing mandolins, I use a large file. And I've mentioned this before multiple times, is don't touch the center of the fret with the crowning file. All you're doing is taking those, you're taking that squareness out, and the next stage we'll scrub those crowns back to dead center. So this, the only thing you're using that crowning file for is to get rid of that squareness, the sharpness on both sides of the fret after leveling. Well, I've got that fret guard on there. I want to just touch. It doesn't. They're not very proud. They're just a little tiny bit proud. But this is February is the month you do that in Canada. That's the driest month of the year. So once this is done, it'll never need to be done again. I'm not talking about the fret dress. I'm talking about the edge dress. If you get it in February, you're good. You're good for the long haul. And that's it. That wasn't too bad. I've just thought of something. Normally, if it's rosewood, the only thing I'd ever mask is the plastic inlays, or if there's a real fancy inlay in the fingerboard, I'd mask that off. But with this one, because the fingerboard is walnut that's been stained, you know, darker to kind of look like rosewood, well, it means I've got to mask off the whole fingerboard. Otherwise, when I go to scrub the crowns back to center, we would sand off that dark stain that they colored the walnut with. So unfortunately, it's just one of those things, a little bit more extra work. Now we can safely sand all of the tooling marks out without worrying about sanding off the stain. I'm starting with my 400 grit. I'm just getting the worst of that stuff right around this area here where we leveled. I'm also kind of finishing up my edge dress with that 400 initially, just to kind of get, just to soften those edges. This is the scrub block that you'll find in your kit, Robert, and you basically wrap your sandpaper around that. It's been working like a charm for the last half century. So this is our 400. We're going to step it up to 600. 600. We have 3 pieces of 600. I got them stacked here on the block, so. And that has taken out all the traces of the leveling marks of the file. So this is the emery polishing paper, and this is the last step before we buff it out with the canvas wheel and the Jeweler's Rouge. Just go over that. I got a couple of pieces here. Go that a couple of times. Piece of tape coming up there. Like I said, normally on rosewood you wouldn't have to go to this much trouble, but because it's not rosewood, it's walnut stained to look like rosewood, you don't want to take any stain off. So we're ready to buff now, so we're just going to load up that canvas wheel. This compound, you just get it in bar form, Jeweler's Rouge. And we'll buff it out. Man, that's cold. Let's pull an air in from outside. So here's our final touch. We're just kind of rubbing off the compound, and then we're done. At least with the frets we're done. Still a bit of work yet. Beautiful. That did it. So we are now with the bridge. Oh, that's great. That drastically improved the neck to body angle. So now we'll get this action wherever we want it. So now, instead of this, we've got this. But I'm not wasting any time with that saddle because I can see they've chased this to the leading edge. 5 of 6 strings are as far forward as they can go, which means they ran out of real estate. I'm going to go right to a cantilevered saddle right away. I'm not messing around with this one. Okay, for Will and Patrick and Bill Stewart, I've opened up that chuck. I've loosened off the table. I'm raising that until the hex drive goes into the chuck, right? And then, before I tighten that, I'm tightening up the table because it drops a little bit when you loosen it off. Okay, so it's still, I haven't tightened the platform yet. So now I'll tighten up the actual chuck until it grabs that hex drive. You got the three jaws on the chuck will make a positive lock. Okay, so that's basically grabbed. Now, and only now, I snug this down. And it doesn't need a lot of torque, it's just a little bit. And that's it, we're ready to go. Now I clamp the actual platform to the table so it doesn't shift when we kick the sander on. I mean, these 6 compensated nuts for these next 6 Gibsons have paid for this 3 times over. Yeah. Here's the first run at this cantilevered compensated bridge saddle. Just so you know, I've just put the original nut back in for now. Okay, the bridge is done. Now we can sort of abandon the bridge because now we need to start on the compensated nut. Just got to reduce the thickness of that leg so it drops right in. So to get a nice press fit, we're going to go back to the disc sander, the drill press disc sander, and just skim that down a little bit. Now we've got to bring the height of the leg down, and we have to put that radius on the ledge itself. Just skim that down. Radius that crank. All right, this is the final call. This thing is 100%. That is our saddle. That's what we ended up with. I'm just going to scuff it out with some 600 grit and make it look a little prettier. Now at the other end, that is what we ended up with for the compensated nut. So these are 11 to 52 strings, although I stepped up the first string to 12th thou from 11th thou. So if I want to get really fussy, which I probably will, I can skim back that leading edge all the way across, sort of clean this up. I'll probably do that. I'm going to do it on the edge of the new sander. It makes a pretty quick job of that. Before I even do that, I'll bring you in and show you the tuner, and we'll go through the whole gamut, string to string, fret to fret, open string, 1st fret, 12th fret, 7th fret, and 19th fret. There's our E and 12th fret, 7th fret, and octave. 12th fret and open. 1st fret. It's our A string, 12th fret, 7th fret, and octave. 12th fret fretted and open and 1st fret. Open, 12th fret, 7th fret, octave, 12th fret fretted, open, and 1st fret. There's our 3rd string, 12th fret, 7th fret, 12th fret fretted, open, and 1st fret. And then 1st fret. 1st string. And then 1st fret note. Okay, now as always, the real test is just play some chords. Let's do that. You know, I have to say that I'm very impressed with this guitar. I mean, the top has got a beautiful very slight spherical radius on it. Of course, it's got the compensated nut now, and it tunes beautifully. And these are the 11 to 52, so like a custom light. I think Martin now make the same gauge of string, 11 to 52, just a little bit, a shade lighter, 1 thou all the way across, lighter than regular lights. The bridge saddle has been cantilevered and intonated. And for any of you Patreon guys that are actually doing this type of work, you really got to make sure that that cantilevered section is not hung up on the edge of the slot, otherwise your pickup won't work. Now, to get that to seat perfectly, and it is perfect. We've got walnut back and sides, maple neck. It's a quarter sawn grain, so you don't have to worry about this neck ever breaking. That'll never be an issue. Walnut fingerboard, walnut bridge. And like I mentioned earlier, this type of bridge is, you know, it's not overly large, not a very big footprint. And I'm sure there are fasteners under there. There's no way that little strip of wood is going to withstand that string tension. You need the helpers in there. Now, I am going to get in with my iPhone and have a look at the bracing. But the general consensus, as far as I'm concerned, this is a very nice guitar. I mean, it was impossible to play when the guy brought it in. It just sat for months and months and months since he bought it. But now that it's been ultra tweaked, whew, it is very nice. So, I've got something here I'm playing that's, this is kind of a 6/8 thing, and you've heard me do this before where I've layered chords. I'm arpeggiating the chords sort of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So, we're going to start here. Okay, this is the second layer. This is both of those parts together, and I'll just blow over top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3. this is the wrap-up on this J15 with the walnut sides, walnut back, walnut bridge, walnut fingerboard, and maple neck. And that is our compensated cantilevered saddle. I've gone inside and I've snapped a bunch of photographs of the bracing, and you know, I gotta say, the Montana Gibson guys have totally got it together. This is a beautiful guitar. It's an interesting experiment just comparing these guitars sort of back to back, literally. So there's the walnut back. I got to get a better look at it. It's sort of reflecting the light. Okay, there you go. How can you not like that? It's beautiful. Nothing wrong with walnut. Orville Gibson was fine with walnut. Most of those early instruments he made were made out of walnut. Of course, in the turn of the century, there were walnut trees in Michigan 8 feet in diameter, so he used what was available. It's funny how it's come full circle. Most of the manufacturers now are employing walnut in their building. I've got a bunch of walnut backs and sides, as well as rosewood, but you know, I've always felt that walnut was a great wood. And there is the compensated saddle on the J15. And there is the compensated nut on the J15. And here's another view of that compensated nut. Well, enough looking. Let's have a listen. I'm going to play identical progressions, just a simple little strumming progression on this vintage 45 or 45 vintage, J45 vintage, and then I'm going to play the exact same thing on that J15 with the walnut back and sides and maple neck. Very unusual. So of course this is just your typical mahogany back and sides, mahogany neck, rosewood fingerboard, rosewood bridge. So here we go.